quite small, too fast, and hopefully you'll get to the right place. So today, now I finally get to engage our panelists. Just so you guys know, you have some pretty cool people up here. Alex Miles is a partner at 180 Systems. Alex is a renowned speaker. He travels the world doing speaking circuits. Alex has been with 180 Systems for over 10 years. He founded with his partner Alex Burns. Alex also works very carefully in a specific space of providing guidance, selection, and advisory to companies with no technology affiliation, which means that he provides honest and very accurate feedback, I guess, or feedback that people can really use without worrying that he's getting paid something to say that, which is not true for many of us in the technology field. Garrett Doherty, Dr. Doherty is joining us here as a PhD in both cognition and altered states of consciousness, but he's also our eminent speaker here. He's won the Governor General's Award recently. He's worked and he works with a company that he started now called Thinkable Solutions. But in his past and other lives, he advises the government and our Department of Defense. So very excited to have Gareth here as well. And finally, we have Cheyenne, the founding engineer for the Ask Cypher concept, AI as a layer. And Cheyenne started this project almost 2 years ago. We had the pleasure of meeting him at a Global Student Entrepreneurs Award action, and Cheyenne launched the Ask Cypher concept and product, working on it now for 2 years, and we're just going to have some more announcements about that this afternoon. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here. Let's just give them a round of applause. All right, so we're going to pose with them some first fun questions, and I'm going to give some of you guys, so keep your thinking hats on those questions. So we're going to start with the first question. What is a recent success and failure for your company or customer that you've experienced when applying AI? And for each of those, the success and the failure, give me the size of the problem in dollars or people or something like that. What did it cost to address the problem? What was the outcome? So why don't we start with Alex? Why don't you go first?
Sure, yeah. Thanks so much, Johnny. Thanks for having me here. A couple examples. In my space, we work closely with ERP systems, enterprise resource planning, for those of you who are familiar. And these are large transformational projects. Typically, they take about 9 months to complete. We were tasked by one of our clients to do the implementation in under 2 months, which is a very short timeline. We used AI to help us. There's 2 tasks in an implementation, as Johnny knows, that are very laborious, take a lot of time. One of those is the data migration. So if you think about even 5, 10 years ago, it was a very difficult process to map data from one system to your target system. And that process involves extracting the data, usually cleansing the data in Excel, transforming the data, and then loading it, a process called ETL, into the new system. But we didn't have the time to do this as part of this exercise, and what we were able to do is use a program, it's called Ascend AI, that automatically mapped the fields from the legacy system to the target system, shrunk that time frame down very significantly. The other one that we're seeing more commonly is around reports and dashboards. So previously, we would have had to write up a spec, issue that out to a developer. They would say it's going to take me 10 hours to develop one particular report. We'd pay for that. We'd test the report. Very long process. But now with AI, we're able to take a picture of the existing report, of the template report, and it'll automatically write the code and populate it into the new system. So very powerful that we're able to shrink down the amount of time and start creating more time to value for our clients. So one example, again, go live in under 2 months. Historically, it's not been done, but new companies that we're working with want to get to value much faster at their organization.
How much do you think that saves them, Alex, to use Ascend?
Yeah, for this client in particular, they were getting ready for a sale to private equity, so we didn't do an actual return on investment calculation, but if we didn't hit that date, it would have been catastrophic for the organization.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Pass the mic to Garrett.
Hey there. So I'm going to offer a slightly more deflationary view of AI adoption in terms of my experience. I'm going to focus a little bit more on, I don't know if I'd call them failures, but I'd call them growing pains with respect to AI adoption. So from my perspective, the organizations I've worked at, are really looking at AI transformation inside of more of their operational workflows inside of their business. And one of the things that I want everybody to remember here when we think about adoption in AI is, widely available LLMs were 2024. So we're just halfway through 2026. So the idea that there's a robust database of experiences to be able to share and help you with your adoptions just isn't there. So we're all kind of learning together, which hopefully will come as a relief for people out there. So if you feel like you're behind the curve or whatnot, rest easy. We're all behind the curve, or on the curve, or somewhere around the curve at this point in time. So from my perspective, the things that are really challenging on the AI side of things is less about technology and more about people. So one of the main barriers is really about digital literacy and AI literacy specifically. So understanding your data and understanding what AI can do for you. The second is trust. Johnny did a great job of speaking to trust inside of organizations, and that's a really complicated issue when it comes to people, because trust is about fundamentally about resistance to adoption of AI. I'll give you one example of what that looks like in one organization. But it's also in just not knowing exactly how they would deploy inside of their own workflow. So we're at this phase right now where we're seeing what I would call just organic co-piloting happening inside of organizations. So everybody's got access to some large language model, and they're kind of figuring out how to use it. But that's obviously not a disciplined sort of use case where you're actually going to be able to drive some value inside of your organizations. So getting there requires something a bit more. So one of the organizations that I've worked with, right now there's quite a bit of resistance because they get specialists who do qualitative analysis on customer feedback. So you imagine you've got a customer feedback survey, you've got your radio buttons, so you do all the quantitative analysis, but certainly the qualitative analysis is a really important data set for analysis as well. But they are a team that's PhDs and this sort of thing, and very comfortable in qualitative research. And AI adoption, they feel like that's going to put them in a job, right? And they have all these suspicions about what AI can and can't do because they've never worked with it before. And so they've been resisting being able to engage in sort of basic sentiment analysis on unstructured content, which is a huge advantage. And where they'd be best positioned would be to look at some of the relationships, to sort of do a deeper dive as a human in the loop on that analysis and speed up their time to results. But right now they're resisting that. The impact of that on the organization is really more of an opportunity cost, because right now those people could be repurposed today because they've got skills up in qualitative analysis to be able to support research and analysis inside the organization. Probably amounts to close to $600,000 to $800,000 a year, right, of not repurposing those people for as long as we stay in that resistant state. So what I'd suggest is really that the adoption problem, everybody's playing with it, so it's in organizations, but I don't know that we're quite there in terms of creating the culture and the know-how to be able to fully engage.
Gareth, do you believe that there would have been a smaller problem that would have been more successful to deploy or to work on?
Yeah, so in terms of the maturity model that I support, I think when you're thinking about doing an AI adoption at a sort of larger scale, like beyond this organic co-piloting, so you're now looking to do, let's say, I call it systematic co-piloting, where you've got a well-defined workflow, you can introduce AI into that workflow, like the HR example that Johnny had is a really good example. And now you can create deterministic interventions with AI, so with a job description and whatnot, you can start to create prompt libraries so everybody can do the same, manage the same workflow the same way. I think if you're going to do that kind of an intervention, you should start with your strongest teams, right? So if anybody out there who's thinking that AI is going to solve your problems is not the best way to start adoption. If you're going to start small, you want to start with your most successful team and try to make them better. It's the best way to pilot. You're going to learn a lot more. You're going to have engaged people. They will know their business processes better than poorer performing parts of your organization as well. They'll understand their workflows much better, and they'll be more engaged at being able to get successful and learn as you grow. Because I think honestly, adoption really is about a learn as you grow approach.
Fabulous. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you all about actually efficiency as our major client working with that cipher. So we have about 200 to 300 active users on a daily basis, and we've had them as our demo users for over a year now. So in this journey, there's several hundreds of failures and successes, but I'll tell you a little about the quantifiable ones. Efficiency as a whole, I would break down the use cases in 3 categories. One would be the efficiency consultants who are implementing the ERPs would use that cipher and its knowledge of the ERPs themselves to actually make the implementation work faster, right? So they're really doing the same length of work for the clients, but the amount of work that they're doing is a lot more efficient, upping the margin for them. The other use case is going to be the developers in the team, right? So they're going to Cypher to get code and get guidance on the code, and that's one of the use cases we see AI be best at, which is development. And then the other group are the ones who are using it for communication, right? So that's the one that actually I think is the most tricky, right? Like connecting to a biz app and communication are two very similar problem areas, but they're approaching it from a different angle. Whereas, doing code and doing data analysis, those are the simpler cases, right? If we came up with data and the processes for cleaning data and for presenting data, then if you give good enough tools and good enough functions to these AIs, they're going to be theoretically really good at taking care of the data. But it's the human context that actually becomes the problem in AIs doing real, reliable work at enterprises. So I'll tell you about like the business application and the communication aspect, right? So as employees, as we get into the company and we get to a point where we're allowed to actively communicate with the external users, with the stakeholders, we have been trusted to have known and to have kept the context of that company, of years of experience in our brains, right? Maybe it's in notes, maybe, I have to take time to actually recall it. But regardless, I have years of context in my brain, right? Whereas the best LLM that we get now has roughly 1 million tokens in its context limit. So that's what, 27 pages of a book. We can't really offload the type of work that requires active decision making based on insight and experience to AIs. Whereas we can maybe add automation as a part of the AI's jobs. But then there's also a caveat there. Automation itself requires you to be deterministic, whereas AIs are probabilistic, right? The biggest problem that we have in implementing AI in an enterprise is that as humans, we approach it and we think, well, this thing should be either very, very reliable and deterministic, like it's software, which is what we're used to, right? We're used to like 5 nines in reliability. We're used to clicking a button and the button doing exactly the same thing every single time. That's software. That's not AI, right? AI is a probabilistic machine. At the best case, inherently, AI is going to hallucinate. There's no other definition based on the technology that we have now around it. But then if you think about it, we also hallucinate, right? Like if I'm walking and I see something in the periphery of my vision and I think it's a snake and I jump, that's my visual identification system hallucinating, right? If I'm trying to speak here and I say something wrong, that's my Broca's area and Wernicke's area in my brain hallucinating, right? Giving the wrong output, thinking this is the correct output. Now, when you put humans in front of an AI, they go into 2 categories. They either expect it to do everything very well every time, or they expect it to be able to reason like a human. And if none of these happen, they become angry. And then they get into their seats and they yell at the AI, and the AI won't do anything good for them. So in efficiency's case, we're quantifying it about 25% of run rate, so that's about like $5 million a year maybe. Not to give out too much efficiency secret sauce. But we've invested over $2 million in 2 years. And obviously we're a layer, we're implementing the software so that it can serve a larger group beyond what we're training it to. But efficiency as a very diverse group actually allowed us to find all the different ways that the AI is gonna fall down on its face, which really go back to our expectations of these AIs. So if we take the time to actually provide it with the right context, both the AIs and the humans interacting with it, then it would be a lot less of a friction implementation.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you very much for our panelists. I'd like to throw the mic over to the crowd. So if you have a question, please, sure. Name your speaker and name your question, okay?
Just a general question, whoever wants it. My name is Umar, and this company in Northern Virginia, they put in a system where their sales reps had a camera looking at them, what they're typing, what they're doing, what they're saying. And there was a revolt in the sales team. And after about 2 months of struggle, they took them aside and said, what we're trying to do is to make you more efficient. That outline a bad call, we'll help coach you through it. Outline a good call, we'll do that. So change is difficult for everybody, but when they explained it properly, the salespeople loved it because their sales went up. So do you think we have a communication problem when we're getting people to understand AI, and if you could frame it better, that we would get better outcomes?
top on this one because I like representing the change management part of this. So as everybody out there, there's some ProSci certified folks out here. ProSci, okay, great. You know, one of the greatest challenges in terms of change inside of an organization, bringing people on board, is the uncertainty that comes along with that. So, you know, all the change management best practices involve making sure people understand the purpose, which in this case they hadn't done that, and to the extent possible, giving people a little bit more autonomy or control over this. And then that helps them manage the uncertainty part of this. And I think with AI adoption, because everything that's out in the news, I mean, and some of it's not illegitimate. People are worried about the risks to their own jobs. So part of it, just forgetting the cameras in this case alone, just the idea of having an AI intervention that's now augmenting your workflow would feel like a risk to the average person. If they didn't understand that the goal wasn't to change the complement of the team, the size of the team, was just changing the way that they work. That's a much different value proposition and much different risk. I imagine also having cameras on you know, the surveillance part of that, which again, they're not interested in surveillance for the sake of surveillance. They're interested in the data that comes from the visual recognition software to be able to link that up to sales success, the calls and everything else. If they have that explained to them better up front, I think you'd have less of a concern. And I get back to this adoption problem. I think open communication, transparency is a really key part, and explainability is a really key part of AI. And I know, last thing I'll say about this is the DBS Bank in Singapore is one of the leading adopters of AI, and they have an ethical framework called PURE that focuses very much on two of these factors are explainability and respectability. So if people can see that and understand the adoption, how it's going to impact them a little more easy, you can reduce, I think, some of the concerns and the resistance you see to adoption side of the organization.
Take one more comment. Last question, and then
Oh, for sure. So one thing that I definitely would add to, in line with Gary's comment, is we have these things called schemas in our brains, right? Like, so most of the time we're not really thinking consciously. It's just the schemas that are triggering and giving us subconscious thoughts that we react to in our consciousnesses. And now in 2026, one very, very common topic is AI going to replace me, right? So anything that we do in the agentic world that's gonna trigger that schema is gonna be met with extra friction, right? So really the best outcome here is not saying that this is gonna replace you with a surveillance method, right? Than to be, it's a tool that's going to enable you to do better and more, and earn more, right? Everybody likes things connecting to money. But yeah, no, anything that's giving us surveillance is gonna be a killer for AI adoption.
thank you. Question now here.
My name is Alex Todd, founder, CEO of Reliability. My question to all the panelists is, for enterprises, what is the most difficult thing to prove in AI implementations?
I can start with that one for sure. I think reliability is the toughest part. You know, when we train an employee, regardless of how long that training is, when we certify them, then we can trust that they're gonna do the job, right? Unless really extraneous circumstances come along, that job is gonna be done right. That's not the case with AI right now, right? Even in the cases where we have the best definition, there's still some inherent risk that we gotta look for. And in an enterprise, like Johnny said, you know, if your invoice has a few wrong lines on it, then what are you gonna do? Then that's a big problem. So as we are growing in AI adoption, establishing reliability and being able to show it empirically is the biggest deal for us to adopt.
Yeah, I think I would just say quick wins, right? Something Gary touched on earlier. It's important that you can start with a small process, one business process that you're able to show some success on. If you start with your top processes or a large systemic change on AI that's more likely for failure, it's difficult to get adoption from your team. So if you start with a single process, something that you can gain some confidence, then the team's able to trust the system, trust the reliability more, and you can build on that much easier.
And to reliability, I'd add, again, transparency and explainability, right? I mean, it's a black box for many people when they can't understand based on some set of inputs how they got to the outputs. If it really is a black box, that creates trust issues. So when you're thinking about your implementation, being able to explain what happens between the inputs and the outputs of the model is very important.
Thank you very much to our panelists. I'm going to move on to the next question now. And our next question is, for anyone who wants to get ahead of the curve, and I hope that this applies to literally everybody here, what should they study, invest in, or learn right now?
the mic again, so I'll start, I guess.
Yeah, again, so the space that I'm in, I'm lucky I get to work with a lot of the top technology vendors, Oracle, Microsoft, Workday, we were talking about it earlier, and I'm able to see their AI strategy firsthand. So of course, there's some general information, you guys can find information about AI using AI, but I think there's two things that would really stand out for your organization. One is understanding what your company's AI strategy is. Is your company's strategy using Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, a mix of different AIs, because they all are slightly different. So it's important to have your AI strategy first, and once you have that, you can start to build on it. So again, am I focused solely on one AI tool, or am I using a more general tool like Automation Anywhere, possibly Ask Cypher, and start to build on that?
Yeah, so the way I want to answer this question is I think about this from kind of a maturity model perspective. So what do you need to know to be ready to start the journey, which I think is really a crawl, walk journey, a crawl, walk, run journey with AI. And so up front, certainly basic knowledge of the technology stack, what's available and how AI works, including understanding how to protect your data, and other techniques like retrieval augmented generation and whatnot to be able to support an enterprise deployment. There's the whole tech side of that, which is really important, but I think the key thing for success is you need to know enough about the technology right now to get started. But there's other things that you want to know on the people side of things, which is really, it's really about teaching yourself what you need to know to be able to manage a deployment inside of your organization. So that's really about AI and data literacy as one part of that. On the business process side, I'm sure everybody here knows their organizations well, but you know that some parts of the organization are known better than others. And so when you're thinking about what, again, for me, the early stages of the maturity model are around growing from co-piloting into more systematic co-piloting into robotic process automation with AI built into deterministic workflows, but in a probabilistic way. You're going to be looking to do that in a way that you have the process knowledge to understand where the real opportunities are inside of your organization, and then you can represent where you can actually plug AI into those workflows to be able to gain that benefit. You should be able to measure that as well. Those well-defined business processes, you've already got performance metrics, presumably that around those processes that will allow you to be able to measure the ROI on that as well, which is another benefit of being able to do that as well. And finally, on the technology side, it's the expertise and know-how inside of your organization to be able to support the deployment as well.
And Sharon, I'm gonna change the question for you a little bit. Think about the individual. Forget the individual in the enterprise. Just the individual. What should they study or learn?
I would say communication, right? Like if we are standardizing all of the knowledge and putting a meter on it in these LLMs, the biggest element of getting what we want out of the LLMs is how well do we communicate with them, right? So we can have the same scenario, we can have the same problem, we can have the problem being solved, but very differently based on the prompts that are given to the AI, right? And that efficiency that comes from the prompting is what is going to change the use cases over time. So then I would say like what you want to invest in is get all the AIs, just get the membership, start talking to them. Each of them have a specific characteristic to them. And then when you go to our layer 2 software, right, like Ask Cypher, like the Microsoft one, you will see that those characteristics are actually consistent and continuous across the different technologies as well. And the more you learn how to talk to each, the better you're going to get using them.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am going to give the audience a chance to put you guys on the spot, okay? So we'll take your question in just a minute, but what I'd like you guys to do is think about a prompt that you would like improved. And so I want you to throw the prompt at the panel and ask them for a better prompt, okay?
Okay, hi, my name is Sunir Shah from Huck AI. So one of the things that I have noticed in my experience, I'm a huge AI adopter, and I don't care, so I'll just do whatever I want in the organization. I like to say I'm just a bag of AIs in a trench coat at this point. Don't even ask me questions.
Love it.
Love that. Yeah, it's fantastic. But then, I was experiencing these things, and on a podcast I was listening to, it really clicked into me what the resistance is. There's two problems that happens when you distribute AI to everybody. It's different than these large systems you're talking about, because that isn't where most companies are. Most people are just a Copilot or Gemini or Claude or whatever. There is the idea that I'm just passing the buck on to someone else. I generated once a 53-page PRD for a client, and like, you want me to read this? I'm like, you can read now? Like the AI is supposed to read it. You just pass it on to your AI. because I write documents for their AI, and I don't have an AI. Okay, that was interesting. So I'm just passing the buck on to someone else. And there was another problem that came up, that in large enterprises, often you can manage high-performing employees and low-performing employees, but AI actually 100x's the low-performing employees more than the high-performing employees, and you get 100 times negative work, and it suddenly floods the organization with trouble, because now you're actually accelerating problems, which is, I think, what most people are experiencing. Seeing AI across larger organizations and what's slowing them down is that, frankly, not everyone at that company needs a howitzer, right? Some of them need to be carrying the sandbags on the patrol. So can you talk to me a little bit about the ground up version, the grassroots version of AI adoption in enterprise? Because there are definitely social problems that are being exposed.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that there's a couple things, including at my organization, that I can talk to there. One is that whether you're this AI in a trench coat, and you might have a lot of ability that maybe other people in your organization don't. And if they're all using ChatGPT, Copilot in different method, and they're all doing the same analysis and then sending it over to your client's AI, you're still gonna get different results. So I think that it is important to have some sort of general framework, some sort of governance around how the AI is communicating back to you. Something that we have at our organization, we put in all of our core values inside of our central AI block, so that way if I prompt differently than Garrett prompts, we get a similar response. So I think that's one piece, and just having some consistency across the organization that's important for getting adoption from the group.
I'm gonna kill it there. We will have time for questions, general questions like yours later. I would like to just kind of engage the rest of the group here as well. Think of a prompt, throw it out against the group, and see what could they improve that prompt. I mean, we can start with a simple one. How would you improve the prompt?
I'm just glad that everybody's struggling as much as we will when they give us the prompts here. So if you're having a hard time coming up with it, imagine what it's gonna be like up here.
All right, here's my prompt. Hire me a great senior director of AI. How can I improve that prompt?
Sure. I think like as a general guideline, you want to always start with a little bit of role play. So you want to start by saying you are this and that, right? So in this scenario, I would say you're a senior HCM specialist, helping me with hiring the role, right? So they're not mind readers, right? Like it's really again about communication. Give them all the context, give them the role play, what they got to do. And I think the next best thing to add to every prompt is interview me. Ask me questions, right? Get the AI to actually ask you clarifying questions about the task before you set it off to do things.
And what I'd add to that is, so I like to create more context. So I support the prompt with better context. So I use Gemini a lot. So, and I will build a gem that gives me the role and sort of parameters of how the model is going to behave. And I upload as much information as I can to create more context. So if I have other job descriptions or other aspects of the organization, because the more you can constrain that context window, the better the probabilities are going to start to work in your favor. You're going to get something at the other side of that actually looks like something you would actually support. And then if it was, let's say, a new role, I would run the research function on AI and actually get sort of best practices around how these roles are defined. And I've used that as an input into the gem, because then I take that document and I upload it as one of the other documents to create more additional context. So I bootstrap my way towards a new work description.
Love it, building in pieces. We have a question. Well, we have a prompt over here. Here we go.
Yeah, what would the prompt be, how AI would increase the value of this session?
I can take that. In this kind of a situation, I would give it the deck, the transcript of our conversation, and then do the role play, and then at the end, the interview, right? Get as much context before it starts doing the job, and then tell it to give me pointers on how to improve it, right?
What would your expected response be?
At first, a lot of blabbing. I always do that, but that's the point of the interview, right? Like, if you get it to ask you questions first, it'll do less blabbing on the offer.
You could also just put in what are your objectives. So of course, everyone's using AI a little bit differently here. You guys are all going to get different value from the session. So how can you increase the value of the session for me or my organization? Here are my objectives for the call.
Hi, my name's Preet. I have a bit of a light question, if you will, but regardless, it's a valid question. So a couple of years ago when I started with prompt engineering, refining, one of the jokes we had in our group was that if you add please and thank you or sorry or something like that to your prompt, it just responds better. Do you think that's true, or that was just a rumor?
I do not think so. no.
Okay.
But I will say, I did an exercise recently where I asked my AI, which is Copilot that I use at my organization, to rank my personality and tell me how I can help prompt better. And it said I was basically very concise and mean, but I get very concise answers back. I don't like when I get a big long script, so I think that, yeah, how you're prompting is, of course, very important. And actually, the best prompt engineers that we see, my panelists might think the same, are developers, right? So it's one thing to get into prompt engineering just from a background that isn't related, but still we're finding that the best prompt engineers come from a development background. They understand how the model is thinking behind the scenes.
So I'll tell you a little about the recent meta that's come out from papers. Turns out it's actually the opposite. AIs do better when you bully them. So there was this paper actually that found that if you tell the AI that they're on PIP, right, and they have like $100, right, and every mistake that they make, they lose $20, and if they come out run out of money, they're fired and they're gonna get turned off. They're gonna do better, right, because they think they don't have as much time to actually mess up. Similarly, in coding, if you tell it that there's another agent that's going to look over its work, it's going to make more mistakes, right? So it's okay to bully them. They're not sentient yet. They're not going to transfer the usage. They're not going to come after you once they're sentient. It's fine.
Great question, thank you. And anybody else have a prompt they want to run? Okay, one more at the back right behind you, Ireland.
Like some companies are launching their prompt libraries, like Oracle NetSuite launched. It's like 100 prompts. Based on your experience, would you recommend any website, online media, where you can find the best prompts for industry specific?
I would say like it should be the organization's job to come up with a prompt package, and beyond that, it has to be their own experience, right? Like I know the way I communicate with my employees and my agents similarly requires me to tweak some things for it to work better, right? You gotta find that out for yourself, and then on top of what the organization says you gotta do.
Yeah, and I would just echo that, saying context matters for LLMs, and your context and your organization is a really important part of the equation, so you should be designing your prompts around your organization, for sure.
I think there's always going to be cowboys out there who are putting prompts out and developing agents on their own, but yeah, I mean, large organizations, especially Oracle NetSuite, as I know you know, right, Kish, is they're going to have a list of approved agents that you'll be able to take and put directly into your organization. And so you'll have these standard prompts and agents, but of course you'll always have off-market ones that you can use as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the participation, guys. We're going to move on. We have two more questions. The last question is going to be the funnest one, but we're going to do almost get out of the way here with what is the best way to train yourself to get the most out of today's AI tools? Maybe that's a bit more of an emphasis now that I think about it on that second question we just had, but what would you say to someone if they went out tonight, after this session, or today after the session, I guess, and they wanted to go train themselves on AI, what should they do that's relevant and helpful to the enterprise?
The short answer is use it, right? The best way that you're going to learn about AI is to get in there, to use it, to work with your prompts, and to start building on it. The next piece, which I already mentioned, is take a small business process and focus on how you can automate that. So at our organization, what we do something called a business process review. We encourage the organization to talk about problems. We consider every problem an opportunity, and then we categorize the problem into impact and type, but also we say, what's the impact if we're able to resolve this problem? So if you do this exercise in your organization, what are the top business processes that we should focus on where we're gonna have the greatest return on investment? Start with a single process and start prompting, start using it. More for the organization, Johnny, but it works, the response is the same if you're an individual working at an organization as well.
Yeah, and I brought a quote along for this one that I got from Walid Hijazi. He's one of the program leads at Rotman. Anybody's been at their organizational transformation course. And he has this is on one of his slides, and I think this is perfect for this situation. He says, when we focus on technology rather than business objectives, the strategy becomes about inputs instead of outputs. So when you're thinking about adoption, again, just as a base level of understanding technology-wise that you want to be able to achieve to figure out what it is that you're trying to leverage. And so certainly invest in AI literacy across your organization, that's foundational. But when it comes to thinking about a deployment, you need to be thinking about how that ties back to your business objectives. And your example was great, Alex. I mean, having a strategy that's focused on ROI and what the output is. What value are you trying to create? What business outcome are you trying to achieve? Not what outputs you're going to gain from the model, right? The outputs are in service of a business objective always. And so if you have that at the forefront, I think you're more likely to have a more successful initial set of deployments that are really designed around creating value than they are about just sort of adopting AI. And I would agree with Alex as well that, you know, learn by doing. Again, there's a base level of readiness in terms of understanding the technology, understanding the change management dimensions, and making sure that you're on a pathway to create trust inside of the organization. But beyond that, start with co-piloting, get more systematic with it, and work towards automation, some light automation projects.
For sure, I'll be quick on this one. Echoing everything that the panel said, use it, and then, you know, if you're a leader, get your organization to be okay with using their AIs. Most likely everybody's already using it, and if your team isn't talking about it, there's a problem with, you know, the acceptance of AI usage there. Accept it, make sure you have rules around it, so then you actually are hedging against those unpredictable outcomes that AIs inherently have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, you guys. And for our last question for the panel, then we'll open up the floor to your questions for the remainder of the time. Does vibe coding work? Everyone's heard of vibe coding. First of all, maybe somebody wants to define vibe coding, and then let's talk about whether or not.
I can actually, I'll do that in my answer. So vibe coding, that was a part of my answer I wanted to get. I think it came out in 2025 out of a tweet, right? And the person who came up with the term vibe coding, the quote around it was something like, throwing caution to the wind and, you know, taking your hands off the keyboard, and that was the definition of vibe coding. That was the meme definition, right? That's like sitting in front of Claude and being like, develop a cure for hantavirus, make no mistakes, you know, right? That was the definition of vibe coding, and obviously, no, that's not gonna work, right? To be able to build a software, right? Like the AIs are gonna reduce the barrier of entry from a normal person to technicalities, right? You can, you know, have a use case where you do it 1,000,000 times a day, ask Claude to write you a script, you double click on it, that's done like that. Perfect. But that's not gonna become a SaaS. That's not gonna become an enterprise software that's going to serve hundreds of thousands of different use cases every day. So in that sense, in that definition, no, vibe coding doesn't work. But in 2026, vibe coding has a different definition, right? Vibe coding is the idea of using AI as a tool for programming. Parallels that I use all the time is, without machinery, we would have hundreds of people in fields doing agricultural work. With machinery, we have a lot less of those doing the same agricultural work, right? So vibe coding in 2026 is less low-level developers, right? More engineers, right? Less people who are focused only on writing code and more focused on decisions that lead to better code architecture. So in that sense, yeah, vibe coding works very well because writing code is like writing an essay. When you get the point across, right, when the data works and travels across, the rest of it is a matter of optimization. And both of those, both writing the initial code and getting the data across, and optimization, very well done by AIs. But it has to be a human that's developing the entire stacks, right? Because again, the AI is gonna remember 1,000,000 tokens, you're gonna remember a lifetime of experiences and generating the use case and product for your users.
Yeah, and I think what I would add to that is that when it comes to vibe coding, it works best in development environments already. So my brother-in-law, he runs an IT consulting firm that does a lot of large application development, so custom applications. And they started playing with vibe coding about a year and a half ago. And his perspective on this is that they've had a relatively easy go with vibe coding because they are a heavy test environment, right? So test before they deploy. And he thinks that so any programming environment or development environment is going to have much better adoption because they will be able to inspect the code and they have testing procedures, they have a testing discipline, and they have a testing culture in place to make sure that before something's deployed that it's safe. Because that's the risk that comes with AI. You think that you're just going to ask a question of Claude to create a website for you. It'll create a website. The code will be perfect, but will function the way that it's supposed to function. Right? Because there's a difference between good syntax and actual application that functions as you want it to function. So I think vibe coding can work, but it works best in supported environments that we're talking about.
Yeah, and just to round it out, I think that as a business owner, I have some level of responsibility to actually encourage some level of vibe coding with my employees that want to be creative, that want to think outside the box. And if you're doing vibe coding on a small scale, just as both my panelists have mentioned, if you have a task that takes 2 hours and you want to make a program that's going to turn that into 15 minutes, I encourage them to go ahead and do that. But if it's more than a simple business process, if it's something that's going to affect multiple departments, then you need a more structured approach than just vibe coding.
We didn't talk a lot about it today, but really about the importance of governance and oversight inside of your organization. Again, we're not trying to squash the creativity here, so we're encouraging use and adoption. But there needs to be some guardrails over what happens to something that's deployed on the client side, for example, because there is risk that comes along with that. And so I would encourage you all to think about, again, how you're deploying it. And internal to the organization, there's the trust factor as well. And so again, having a bit of governance around how you manage the deployments is going to support trust, but it's also going to reduce the risk that you have of a deployment that goes in a way that you don't want it to go.
Thank you very much, Gareth, Alex, and Cheyenne. It's been a pleasure having the whole panel here. AI is full of marketing, full of noise, and it's full of people like you, all who have very strong opinions of your own. So feel free to take the mic, describe your opinion, describe your question to the panelists. We'll take it for about another 10 or 15 minutes. Okay?
Yep. Hi everyone, this is AJ. I work for a major financial institutions in Canada. And I had a quick question. We spoke about governance, so I had governance for a lot of emerging technology. Spoke about the black box, spoke about inputs and outputs. And we're all trying to get to a point where business wants to adopt newer capabilities, wants to streamline processes, engage in better processes. Do we have like any structured governance around the concept of explainability that you spoke about? Can we measure explainability in some way, shape, or form now or in the near future to say, can we trust these outputs? Output one, if I give the same prompt, you get the same prompt, you might get something else, I might get something else. So how do we measure explainability such that we can rely on these use cases? Pause. Good question.
Sure, I'll make a couple of comments. So I don't know if that I can answer that question directly. I mean, right now, like if you look at DBS Bank, which is a really great example here in the financial service institution, they're used as one of the leading examples for AI adoption. They have an ethical framework here, which was where they talk about explainability. I don't know off the top of my head exactly whether or not they're able to quantify that, right? But certainly, there's a couple of ways theoretically you can do that, right? So, and AI is explainable if it's predictable, right? Which means you don't need to know, every aspect of the reasoning. Now, a lot of the models will show the reasoning, so you can actually see that, so you can investigate that. That's one pathway to being able to do this. So you can represent what's there. But it's really complicated in a situation in which the inputs of the model are input to a decision by a senior executive. Or what am I approving? If I'm, a vice president in some business function, and I've got the inputs to this model, before at least I could give you the math. If it was an analytical, if it's data that's coming out. Now it's this really complex multi-parametric model that's like, what does that even mean in terms of what the outputs are? So I think being able to explain the behavior of the model is important, but if you can actually train the model in a way where it's predictably producing the same outputs with the same inputs, and that those are reliably and deterministically deployed whenever the model is used, well, what you can do is similar to human beings, right? I mean, I don't know exactly how well the neurons in your brain work, but if I can reliably predict based on some ask of you that you're going to behave in the exact same way, which is every person in your organization, we don't get so tripped up about what's actually going on in your thought process. What I care about is that you behave in the right ways in the right context.
Well, that's like putting a character certificate for a model, right? We don't have anything to measure apart from that.
Right. Agreed, yeah.
One more comment on the question?
Yeah, can I add to that? Definitely there's no quantitative benchmark right now. And I think that's actually a great point. There should be a quantitative benchmark for enterprise adoption on that. However, what we see in terms of adoption from the development and from the company aspect is the more you show the thoughts that go into the AI's final output, right? Because nowadays the AI is going to have a thinking loop, it's going to have some doing loop, right? The more evidence of that you see, the more likely humans are there to trust it. And there's some research that shows why, you know, like as humans in general, our trust functions again are schemas and heuristics, right? Like there was this Harvard research in 1960s, I think, that you know, they had 2 lines of people waiting for a broken copy machine, and eventually gets fixed. The RA kicks in, and they're like, on one line, they're like, can I cut in front of you? And then the other one is, can I cut in front of you? Because I want to cut in front of you, right? They didn't really add any value there. They just said because. But people were like 60% more open to it, right? Like they allowed people in. Same thing is happening with AI. The more smokes and mirrors you show, the more people are going to trust, regardless of what you show, right? So we see that, for example, with Claude Code's adoption curve. Now it shows what the sub-agents are doing. Barely anybody opens that, right? But the fact that it shows what the sub-agents are doing, I'm good. Like it's just a trust factor.
And so one question I'd have for you, I guess, in the financial services, how is your internal audit function going to approach this?
Very good question.
Right, because that would be, I mean, for me, that would be where you'd want to have that defined and with a set of standards around that. So they're going to have to deal with this challenge going forward.
I come from the external audit.
Okay, so you get it.
That's why my question was.
Yeah.
Okay, I have an opinion and a question. So my name is Hallie. I just left. I was director of product management at Meta. Just left. And one thing that we started to find was really interesting with vibe coding is it allowed people who used to not be able to build things to at least build sort of like, you know, prototypes. So my team ran a lot of decision making, and that used to be in the form of documents or decks. And there was always a, you know, demos, win debates, show, don't tell. But that was really hard when you were trying to communicate a lot of information and you needed to like show risk profiles like that. And so we started to build quick visualization tools, and you could see people's eyes just like light up when AI would allow you to vibe code a site, a demo, something like that. So I think vibe coding works in other ways too, in that it allows you to sort of rethink how you drive outcomes in a non-builder capacity. So just wanted to share that opinion. But my question for the panelists is, in your sort of consulting capacity, advisory capacity, what are some of the most interesting people questions you are being asked? Because we've talked a little bit about governance, about the need to, you know, some frameworks for helping people feel more confident that their, you know, job loss is like obviously major meta. But I'm really curious for like, if you're seeing any leaders who are being really thoughtful about how to help people, not just use tools, but think about this as a massive point of transformation and how we think about working and the human value of work.
Good question.
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks so much. And I do have an answer to your question, of course. But I think that in 5 years, 3 years time, the way that we're working, especially with the major systems that I work with, is going to be significantly different. Today, the systems still take a lot of data entry. There's a lot of friction it takes with the users. There's mistakes. And in 3 to 5 years, I think that every person is going to have their own UI. There's going to be agents that are supporting it. But it really changes the overall structure, how we think of SaaS and software, how many user licenses are going to be required if no one's actually expected to go into the system. Now I'm just using natural language to communicate, create my purchase orders for the next 3 weeks based on all of my production orders that are in the system. So these are some things that we hear from the top leaders out there, from the large technology firms, and how we expect to work.
Yeah, I think for me, the most thoughtful questions I think are happening sort of from a bigger policy perspective. You know, one way of framing this in economic terms is AI a complementarity or is it a substitution, right? And it's both is the answer. I mean, and where is that impact going to be felt across the workforce? And so you'll see there's some very interesting conversations being driven now in unionized environments and regulated environments, because that's where I think that's going to be sort of the next forefront of these deeper discussions around what this means for the workforce and how do organizations manage those conversations, right? Because from in a unionized environment, their perspective is on preserving jobs. But we're transforming organizations very rapidly internally. So how do you manage that conversation if you're in a unionized environment? I don't know if anybody here is in a unionized environment. When you're thinking about adoption, again, thinking about that change resistance and trust factor there, what does that conversation look like? Can you, are we just doing complementarities here, in which case we're just changing the composition of the workforce, but we're still growing, so the same number of people but doing different jobs? Or are there going to be substitutions, in which there may very well be in some organizations, depending on what the industry looks like? Those are tougher conversations, right? Because how do you build trust now with somebody who's automatically suspicious of the employer, who you need to get on board with large-scale transformation inside a big organization, which unions tend to be in large organizations. So for the large enterprise space, I think you're going to see some interesting stuff coming out in the next couple of years. And I know the governments are racing to catch up to that as well. Bill 194 in Ontario about transparency in AI. The federal government, I know, has now an AI ministry, and I think they just rolled out a governance framework. So there's big policy things coming in, but I don't think those are going to be perfect. I think they're our first sketch of what it looks like, and those are going to change rapidly in the next couple of years as well.
Thanks. I'm going to move on to a question over here. I'm waiting.
Hi, my name is Amina, and I'm thinking a little bit about the ROI with AI, which Johnny mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. I've seen similar statistics in multiple reports, and all of them say that we don't have a lot of data on ROI, and the data that we do have is not very positive. So I'm thinking, as an IC, how do I make a case for AI workflows for my organization if we don't have that data yet? And I acknowledge, the panel's advice on starting small and starting with one problem, and I think that's great advice, but how confident can I be that, my suggested workflow will save X number of hours or X number of dollars if we don't have that data yet?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I think what you're saying is just a matter of fact in 2026, right? Like maybe in 10 years we'll have different databases showing this, but today, if we have that question, we gotta come up with the data, right? And how well can we actually present that data? How unbiased can we be? How well can the experiments be designed? Really become the questions. But we just gotta establish it. We don't know, right? That's one side of it. The other side, I think, if I were to draw parallels in the industry and outside in human history, most of these evolutionary technologies that were adopted did have the skepticism and lack of data in the beginning, right? There was always those few who took the first step, generated the data, and then some of them actually lost in the way, right? That's just par for the course. But, with ERPs even, right? Like there's data that shows some companies, fail ERP adoption after 5 years. Should you not apply an ERP to your systems? No, you should. By definition, it's something that's going to help you. So then as an organization, we're going to take the effort to see whether it does. And in 2026, I would say, we can be hopeful. And from the data that we have, it's looking very well. But yeah, we don't have the funding data.
It's a good, honest answer.
Yeah, and I think maybe, depending on the maturity of your organization, lots of different organizations being represented here. I think an important first step in being able to do, again, what I would think of as lower level use cases are really going to be used for business process supports and business process augmentations. And so if you don't have the data right now or the performance metrics to be able to measure that process, like if you have a Lean Six Sigma in your business process and you can't tell, then it's going to be hard for you to show the ROI for AI, but it's probably going to be hard for you to show the ROI in any change to that process currently as well. So it's not necessarily a problem for AI adoption. It's kind of a problem for how much visibility you have for return on investments to any kind of performance improvement in any part of your program. And so I would argue that that's a good first step, and actually probably part of what we want to define as readiness for being able to adopt AI is to be in a position to measure it on the other side as well.
Thank you. Did you want to take a...
Yeah, just quickly, maybe just a different approach on it. There are government grants available for this, so if you do have a use case for your particular client that you're working with, there's a number from the Ontario Centre of Innovation. They're a nonprofit, but there's programs to support technology, digital transformation, as well as AI-specific initiatives. So maybe you have a client that's interested in moving, but they don't have the budget or they don't have the timing to start on that process. Even if the ROI isn't as defined as you'd like it to be, that could be a good approach to get them started.
Great point. BDC has a program called LIFT with exactly that.
My name is Darius. Question for the panel. I have these vendor talks all the time on vendor for AI, and one topic that comes up all the time is, why do I not just build whatever thing you are selling? How do you guys approach build versus buy?
Yeah, that's great, and I think my short on fun answer to that is going to be really the ability to build and connect. And AI isn't the barrier here. It's the knowledge and the context that you save, and the way you use that knowledge and context given the use case is going to be the biggest differentiator in the use case of an AI in an enterprise. So yes, anybody can build an LLM agentic system that calls tools and has some level of conversationality. Whereas creating an AI that has been tested over like 2 years, for example, or in Anthropic, like decades of use cases, hundreds of thousands of users, where they find the actual least friction architecture for context management is a big, big task. And you know, for us with efficiency, it's been 2 years, and we had the connections month 3, right? But it's been 2 years of us maximizing how well the agent can do, given the fact that it's supposed to be a generalizable approach, right? These AIs, they can't be coded into one program. At the end of the day, by definition, they're probabilistic systems. So really, I think, yeah, the build isn't the issue. It's the knowledge of the builders that's going to be commoditized.
Let's have Alex respond to this one.
Yeah, sure. I think that when I think about build versus buy, especially with the clients that we work with, what are their internal capabilities, right? So if they have the internal capabilities, then they have an option to potentially build. Otherwise, they are kind of forced into a buy decision. So I think once you have that, and you have the option to build versus buy, we do a business case. So how much time is it going to take? What's the effort for us to build it, to maintain it, versus us purchasing something off the shelf and potentially modifying it?
I'm the MC, so I can't answer, but I will give you an analogy that I like. We can all go home and make a good meal tonight, and some of us are going to go out and have dinner at a restaurant. That's the build versus buy discussion, if you ask me.
I gotta do that.
There you go. And if you want to join us, we will have an happy hour, but that's fine. Just want to thank everyone. Oh, we have one more question. Wait, one more, and then I'm going to wrap it up. We do have a networking lunch, so you will absolutely have a chance to come up and talk to us anyways, okay?
Hi, my name is Steven. I just have a quick question, and it's about the whole ROI in the enterprise and the deterministic versus probabilistic model, right? So for like, say, like a company in the past that invested a lot into RPA, right, and software like UltraX or UiPath or something like that, right, that handled a lot of the automation, and now the strategy is, hey, we have all the AI tools that can, quote unquote, automate for you. What do you think is like the path going forward? Do you see AI replacing RPA space? And for a company that has to now justify putting expense on both, like what would likely happen, in your opinion?
For the rest of the audience, you guys just mind quickly defining UiPath, UltraX, that type of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I just guessed what an RPA is. Do you want to add what an RPA is?
Yeah, so it's basically like, I guess it's like software meant for people that like generally non-coders,
Yeah.
like local non-code solution that can build like automation that can mimic their work. So that kind of tools.
For sure, for sure. So like no-code environments where you can put up a workflow and that workflow will become automated given the triggers and the output that you want to have. So that's a great question. And I don't think there's a replacement here. AI is the decision-making automation, not the task automation, right? In situations where you need discretion, then the AI can come into play, right? So I think in the future, we're gonna have a lot of these agentic first and software first organizations merge into one, right? Where they become LLM-based RPA generation, right? You speak in human language, but the LLM creates the RPA for you. That's gonna be the use case, I think, in my mind at least. But really, LLMs come into play when decision-making, given discretion, needs automation, not the mechanical task. I would say, actually, there would be less ROI in basic mechanical tasks.
Alex, why don't you take the next one, then I'm going to give Gareth a chance too, but the question also was, what do you do for companies that are already invested in UiPath and stuff like that? And then now they're dealing with agentic, right? I think that's closer to it.
Yeah, and I think that you need to be on a platform now that supports AI, supports enhancements. The pace that AI is moving at is so quick. So yeah, I do believe maybe it's not the answer that you're looking for, but you need to be on a platform that's going to allow you to build new processes and change your existing processes. So it depends specifically on the RPA processes that have been built out already. But if they're not supported on a platform that's going to encourage more AI processes for your organization to develop, then yeah, I think that work is going to need to be redone, modified, or enhanced to allow you to go further, faster in the near future.
Good. Yeah, I'll keep it simple because I agree with both my co-panelists, but it's kind of like this, you know, AI is kind of the hammer to which everything's a nail now at this point in time, but it isn't actually. I mean, and that was the point that was made up here. So I don't think that depending on what you're automating and depending on how you're, especially for no-code automation side of your environment, those tools may be perfectly applicable in some parts of your business. They may continue to be so. But to Alex's point, certainly bringing in and being sensitive to any AI adoption changes and having access to the tools and exploring what those look like are probably a reasonable investment as well. Existing investments.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Just give them a round of applause, please.